Hey everyone, in this section we will talk about expansionary monetary policy and contractionary monetary policy. The Fed uses expansionary monetary policy during a recession and contractionary monetary policy during an inflation. The Federal Reserve Bank is trying to control the Fed funds rate, which is the interest rate at which the commercial banks lends funds to another commercial banks overnight. One of the ways the central bank is doing these open market operations is by affecting or changing the supply of loans available in the economy. So this graph is mixing up the expansionary and contractionary monetary policy together. My job is to make you understand things better by separating the expansionary and contractionary monetary policy in two separate graphs. So I have two quadrant graphs. The one on the right is going to explain expansionary monetary policy. One on the left is going to explain contractionary monetary policy. So I'm just going to name this one as figure 1 and this one as figure 2. On both these graphs, there is interest rate on the vertical axis and the quantity of loans on the horizontal axis. Initial equilibrium is E0, where interest rate is 8% and quantity of loans is equal to $10 billion. Now, if you look at figure 1, the Federal Reserve Bank is undertaking contractionary monetary policy. The way it does that is by decreasing the quantity of loans so that the supply curve for loans is shifting to the left, and we have a new equilibrium point or combination which increases interest rates and decreases the quantity of loans. When the quantity of loans goes down, money supply goes down. Contractionary means lowering. Contractionary monetary policy means decreasing the money supply. Now, if you look at figure 2, we have an expansionary monetary policy where the Fed is increasing the supply of loans, which causes the interest rate to go down from 8% to 6%, and the quantity of loans is increasing from 10 to 14 billion. When the quantity of loan increases, money supply increases, and this is the expansionary monetary policy. Now, in the next slide, I'm going to bring in aggregate demand and aggregate supply to explain this to you better. I have panel A and panel B, these two graphs. I have aggregate demand, aggregate supply, and long-run aggregate supply. The potential gross domestic product is 700. This is associated with the long-run aggregate supply curve. Now, if you look at the graph on the left, you'd see the real gross domestic product is 600, which we get at the intersection of aggregate demand curve and short-run aggregate supply curve. Because the real gross domestic product is less than the potential gross domestic product, the economy is in a recession. When the economy is in a recession, the Fed would want to undertake expansionary monetary policy. The Fed can undertake open market operations and buy bonds from the commercial banks or use any of the other monetary policy tools. And this will shift the aggregate demand to the right, which increases the price level from $90 to $100, and the real gross domestic product increases all the way to potential gross domestic product. So at this point here, E1, we have intersection of aggregate demand or the new aggregate demand, the original short run aggregate supply, and the long run aggregate supply. So here we have real gross domestic product equal to potential gross domestic product. This happened due to expansionary monetary policy, and the Fed could have used any of the monetary policy tools. Now look at panel B. The real gross domestic product is 750. We get this at the intersection of aggregate demand and short run aggregate supply curve. If you look at the potential gross domestic product, this is 700. Because the real gross domestic product is greater than the potential gross domestic product, the economy is going through an expansion or an inflation. So the Fed can use any of the monetary policy tools, including open market operations, where the Fed can sell bonds. And what happens as a result of that? So over here, the aggregate demand shifted to the right, and over here, the aggregate demand will shift to the left. Just remember, we always want to end up at a point of intersection of aggregate demand, short run aggregate supply, and the long run aggregate supply curve. When the aggregate demand shifts to the left, the price goes down and the real gross domestic product goes down to 700. We have a new point of equilibrium here, and at this point the real GDP is equal to the potential gross domestic product. Okay. Now we can look at the pathways or the effects. Expansionary monetary policy, money supply increases. Why does money supply increase? Because the quantity of loans increases. This lowers the interest rate that we looked at graphically. When interest rate goes down, I is for investment, this will go up. Interest rates and investments, these two are inversely related. So we also have the consumption going up. And I would say expansionary monetary policy, the aggregate demand went up. So the final, we have just a bunch of effects. The final effect is the price increasing and the real gross domestic product increasing as well, because the real gross domestic product is also equal to aggregate demand, which is equal to consumption, investment, government expenses, and exports minus imports. So as consumption and investment increased, the real GDP went up. Another thing to remember here, the Fed used expansionary monetary policy during a recession. The opposite during an inflation, the Fed will use a contractionary monetary policy. It's going to lower the quantity of loans. As a result, the money supply will go down, interest rates will go up, investment will go down, consumption will go down, price will go down, and real GDP will go down. All right, that's it for now. Thank you very much.